The sun over Cedarstone Plains burned low and gold, the kind that stretches shadows into long, uneasy memories, and Mara Hartley felt every inch of that cruel light as it fell across her torn clothes, her scraped legs, and the rope that cinched tight around her wrists, suspending her from the crooked branch above. Wind rolled across the empty prairie like a whisper of old ghosts, brushing dust over her bare feet, and every breath she took shuddered like a plea she refused to speak aloud. All she could see ahead of her was the tall silhouette of the rancher, broad-shouldered, vest dusty, hat pulled low, boots planted firm like he had stood over 100 storms without flinching. Colt Rainer. A man whose name folks said only in low mutters, because they never knew if he was the hero of a story, or the men you prayed never crossed your path. Now, with her bound, bleeding, and terrified, Mara didn't know which version stood 20 feet from her, staring like he was trying to read the last pages of a book he wasn't sure he wanted to finish. His horse grazed behind him, calm as a saint, tail flicking flies away, the picture of peace, while Mara silently wondered how many bodies this land had swallowed without complaint. The rope rubbed against her wrists, she hissed at the sting. Colt didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and then, slowly, he knelt, unbuckling the saddlebag on his horse, pulling out a small steel blade that flashed in the sunlight. Mara's pulse hammered. Her dry lips parted. "If you're going to kill me," she whispered, breath shaking, "do it without dragging it out." Colt tilted his head, sliding the blade into his palm with a quiet, deadly ease. "You think I brought you out here to kill you?" His voice was steady, steady in a way that scared her more than a shout ever could. Mara swallowed, though her throat felt carved from sand. "You said it yourself, back at the barn. You shave, and I'll kill you." Colt exhaled, slow, like a man tired of being misunderstood by a world that only ever saw the gun on his hip, never the truth beneath his ribs. "That was a warning," he muttered. "A damn necessary one." He took 2 steps toward her, boots crunching dry grass. Mara's chest tightened. She tugged helplessly against the rope. Colt stopped inches from her, close enough she could smell leather, dust, and the faint scent of tobacco that clung to him like an unending story. He raised the blade, she flinched, but instead of lifting it to her skin, he shifted behind her, slicing through the knots binding her to the tree. The rope snapped loose. Mara collapsed to her knees, gasping as her arms dropped from their strained position. She blinked hard. "Why?" Colt didn't answer immediately. He tossed the cut rope aside, wiped the sweat and grit off the blade, sheathed it, and crouched in front of her. "Because if I wanted you dead," he said, "I wouldn't have saved your damn life last night." Images flashed through her mind, men in black bandanas, horses thundering, gunfire splitting the night, her desperate screams as she ran, tripped, fell, and Colt emerging from the darkness like a storm that chose sides. "Those outlaws," he continued, "are still looking for you. And they won't stop until you're buried or bought." Mara clenched her jaw. "Then why tie me here? Why drag me out to the middle of nowhere like some prisoner?" Colt stood, walked a slow circle around her, scanning the horizon the way only a man trained by danger ever did. "Because you wouldn't listen," he said. "I told you not to touch anything in my ranch house. Not the tools, not the gun cabinet, and especially not the shaving drawer." Mara stiffened. Damn. So he had noticed. Yes, she had gone through his things, panicked, desperate, trying to find a way to prove who she was. And she had picked up that old, ornate straight razor he kept locked away in a velvet case. "That razor," he said low, "belonged to my father. It was the last thing he ever gave me before." He stopped. Jaw tightening. Eyes turning colder than dusk. Mara forced her trembling arms to push herself upright. "I didn't mean to disrespect anything," she said. "I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for a clue. Something I could use to get to Haven Ridge, to warn the sheriff that, warn the sheriff." Colt snorted. "Girl, the sheriff himself is in the pocket of the men hunting you." Mara froze. The world seemed to tilt off its axis. "You're lying." "I don't lie," Colt replied, calm but sharp enough to cut bone. "I saw him meeting them behind the trading post 2 days ago. Money exchanged. Papers passed." Her heart pounded against her ribs. "That can't be true. The sheriff has known my family since I was a child, which is exactly why he sold you out," Colt said quietly. Mara sank back to the ground. Her knees felt weak, like truth itself had knocked her down harder than any outlaw's blow. Colt stepped closer, offering his hand. She stared at it, confused. You tied me up. To get your attention. To scare me. To save your life. She hesitated, then slowly placed her shaking hand in his. His grip was firm, steadying her like an anchor. He pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. You said something back there, she murmured. Something about shaving and killing, what did you mean? Colt's jaw ticked. He looked away. The wind tugged at his bandana. For a moment he seemed like a man wrestling with ghosts only he could see. That razor isn't a tool, he said. It's a mark. A symbol the outlaws carved into their victims. When I saw you holding it, I thought you might have been one of them. Mara stepped back as if slapped. You think I'm with them? Not anymore. Not anymore. Because you're standing here, he said simply. And because you screamed for help last night, not for blood. Silence fell between them, heavy as a storm waiting to break. Somewhere far in the field, a hawk screeched. Mara forced herself to meet his eyes. So what now? If the sheriff is crooked, if the gang is hunting me, if I can't go home, what do I have left? Colt walked to his horse, grabbed a canteen, tossed it to her. You ride with me. Where? To the old mining tunnels near Ridgefall. Only place those outlaws won't follow. How do you know? Colt mounted his horse and looked down at her, eyes shadowed with a painful truth. Because the last time I went down there, I didn't come out alone. Mara tensed. Who? His voice dropped into a quiet, dangerous ache. Someone I couldn't save. The wind stilled. The plains held their breath. Colt extended his hand to her again. But I'll be damned if I fail twice. Mara stared up at him, this gruff rancher who had tied her, freed her, threatened her, saved her, and now was offering her the one thing she thought she'd lost forever. Protection. Hope. A fighting chance. With a trembling breath, she placed her palm in his. Colt pulled her up behind him in one smooth motion. The horse shifted. The plains stretched endlessly ahead. Hold on, Colt said, spurring the horse forward. Because this story ain't done yet. The horse broke into a run, carrying them toward danger, truth, and a future neither of them had planned, but both of them were already tied to. The wind roared around them, dust rising behind like a trail of fire. And the voice inside Mara, once trembling with fear, now whispered with fierce, reckless certainty, this is only the beginning. The night had settled over Ridgefall like a cloak stitched from fear and prophecy, and as Colt Rainer's horse thundered across the dry earth with Mara holding tight behind him, it felt less like a ride toward shelter and more like a descent into the underbelly of a story fate had been writing long before either of them were born. The mining tunnels loomed ahead, black mouths carved into the side of a forgotten cliff, as though the mountain itself had once screamed open. Mara clung to Colt's coat, her breath unsteady, her heart fighting through the echo of his earlier confession, someone I couldn't save. She wanted to ask who, wanted to know the wound that shaped a man like Colt into a storm wrapped in a cowboy's shell, but right now, shadows shifting in the distance warned her they didn't have the luxury of digging into old ghosts. They're behind us, she whispered, and Colt didn't even turn, he only nudged the reins, pushing the horse faster, eyes locked on the narrow path where rock swallowed moonlight. I know, he answered. They've been behind us ever since the night your past caught fire. Mara looked back and saw the faint flicker of torches, moving, hunting, hungry for her blood. Panic stabbed through her ribs, but Colt's voice broke through it like a blade through rope. You're safe with me. I promised I wouldn't fail again. She didn't know what hurt more, the fear pressing against her spine, or the belief blooming in her chest that he meant those words. The horse skidded to a stop at the mouth of the main tunnel. Colt dismounted, lifted Mara down with more strength than gentleness, and guided her inside. The air inside the tunnel was cold, stale, filled with echoes of long-abandoned labor. Their footsteps crunched over broken stones, and every sound bounced off the walls like a reply from an unseen world. Mara hugged her arms around herself. These tunnels, why won't the outlaws come in? Colt walked ahead, lantern swinging in his hand, shadows dancing like spirits around him. Because they're superstitious fools, he said. Years ago, miners dug too deep, hit a pocket of gas, and half the tunnel collapsed. Every man who survived swore the place was cursed. Mara swallowed. Do you believe in curses? Colt paused. The lantern glow caught the hard line of his jaw. I believe in choices, he said. Bad ones. They took a turn, deeper into the darkness, until the sound of the outside world faded. Only their breaths remained. Colt, she whispered, the person you couldn't save, who was it? He kept walking for several seconds, as if every step was a negotiation with the memories he'd buried. Then he stopped. The lantern trembled in his hand. My brother. Mara's breath hitched. Colt set the lantern down, its glow stretching out like a pool of gold on the rough floor. We grew up in these tunnels, he said quietly. Exploring. Playing. Dreaming stupid dreams. One day a part of the west shaft collapsed while we were in it. I got out. He didn't. His voice was steady, too steady, the kind of steady only a man who built walls around his soul could maintain. Ever since, people say I'm cursed. That everything I touch ends up buried. Mara stepped closer, heart trembling for him. I don't believe that. Colt lifted his eyes to hers, and in them was the weight of a man who had carried guilt like a saddle strapped too tight for far too many years. You should, he murmured. Before she could speak, the distant echo of voices thundered through the tunnel. Mara stiffened. Colt grabbed her hand. They're here. They moved quickly, weaving through narrow passageways until Colt pushed her into a small chamber carved out by miners decades ago. Stay behind me, he ordered. Don't run unless I tell you. Mara shook her head. I won't let you fight alone, but Colt's glare froze her. I'm not losing someone again. Heavy footsteps approached. Torches flickered on the walls outside the chamber. Colt pulled out his revolver, slow, controlled, the movement of a man who didn't fire unless a soul deserved judgment. Shadows stretched long across the stone as figures stepped into the tunnel. Colt exhaled. It's the sheriff. Mara's stomach twisted. Sheriff Braddock stepped into view, gun drawn, face twisted into a sneer that made her shudder. Well now, the sheriff drawled, I figured you'd run to these tunnels, Rainer. Like a scared little boy returning to where you killed your brother. Colt didn't flinch, but Mara saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. You're lying, she snapped, stepping out from behind Colt despite his warning. Colt didn't kill anyone. The sheriff smirked. You don't know this man like I do, girl. He's a curse walking on boots. Colt raised his gun in silence. The sheriff's men fanned out behind him, filling the tunnel with the heat of lawless confidence. Give the girl up, Braddock said. She's worth a fortune to the men bidding for her return. Mara felt Colt stiffen beside her. His voice came low, lethal. You'll take her over my dead body. Gladly, Braddock growled. Torches blurred. Shadows lunged. Gunfire exploded, loud enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Mara ducked as Colt shoved her to the ground, spinning, firing precise shots that cracked like thunder. One outlaw fell. Another staggered. Colt moved like a man whose every wound, every regret, fueled the accuracy of his aim. But the sheriff fired back, bullets sparking stone near their heads. Mara crawled behind a fallen support beam, heart racing. Colt shouted, Stay down. But she saw it, the lantern, knocked to the floor by gunfire, flames licking at spilled oil. Fire sprang to life. Fast. Hungry. Spreading across old timber and dust-soaked wood. Colt backed toward her, reload flying into his gun with desperate skill. The tunnel's going to collapse. Mara shouted. Then we finish this fast, he growled. The sheriff aimed again, deadly steady, but this time Mara acted before thinking. She grabbed a rock from the floor and hurled it as hard as she could. It cracked against the sheriff's wrist. He fired, but the bullet veered, striking a support beam above him. The wood snapped. Rocks groaned. And with a roar that shook the world, part of the tunnel ceiling collapsed directly over the sheriff and his men, swallowing them in a cloud of crushing earth. Colt grabbed Mara and pulled her to her feet. Run. They sprinted through twisting tunnels as fire raged behind them, smoke filling their lungs, heat snapping at their heels. Mara stumbled, coughing. Colt lifted her, arm around her waist, dragging her through as the mine rumbled like a beast dying. At last they burst out of the tunnel entrance just as the ground behind them thundered into a final collapse. The entire entrance caved in, sealing the horrors behind tons of stone. Mara collapsed to her knees in the grass, gasping for clean air. Colt knelt beside her, coughing, soot streaking his face. For a long moment, they said nothing. Just breathed. Lived. When Mara finally lifted her eyes, she saw something in Colt she hadn't seen before, something cracked open. Softened. Freed. Colt, she whispered. Your brother would be proud. Colt exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a release years overdue. He looked toward the collapsed mine, jaw tight with acceptance, maybe even peace. Maybe, he murmured. And maybe he sent you to finish the story I never could. Mara rose slowly, stepping closer. You didn't fail me, she said softly. You saved me. Colt turned to her, eyes dark but no longer haunted. No, he said. We saved each other. The plains stretched endlessly before them, dawn rising in soft gold across the horizon, warm, gentle, a promise instead of a threat. For the first time in years, Colt Rainer stood without his past gripping his throat. And Mara Hartley stood without fear chasing her shadow. The world felt wide again. Wild. Possible. Colt lifted his hat, brushing dust from it. Where to now? Mara smiled faintly. Anywhere the story leads. Colt nodded. Then let's ride. They mounted his horse together, the sun climbing behind them, painting the sky in colors that looked like hope. The wind carried their silhouettes across Cedarstone Plains one last time, not as a hunted girl and a haunted rancher, but as two souls who had outrun death, buried their ghosts, and chosen to walk into the next chapter on their own terms. Cedarstone, Mara's narration would say if this were a tale told by firelight,